Today's BTS's anniversary, and as the good army that I am, I spent the morning watching old videos of them. And I can shake away a very specific thing about them back in the day, which is a look that I can only describe as hunger. And of course, I'm not talking about the food kind, but the kind where your soul aches for something it knows it can live without. And it made me realize that I don't think I've ever looked that way. I'm not really sure if I've ever let myself. David Hume said that the reason is the slave of the passions, that logic doesn't actually drive us, it just serves us whatever we already want. He wrote that in A Treatise of Human Nature, and it's one of those ideas that sound super provocative and intense, and then you actually sit with them and think, wait, is that true for me? Because here's my problem, and I think many of yours too. I think I've had it backwards. I don't let passion lead and reason follow. I truly only allow myself to be passionate about things that reason has already approved, things that make sense and are plausible. And that's the cage I live in. A very logical cage in which the only dreams and thoughts that thrive are those that I don't have to fly outside it for. When BTS debuted, they had no rational basis for believing any of it would work. They were signed to a label on the verge of bankruptcy. They weren't winning big awards. Their peers weren't taking them seriously. So, by every measurable indicator, their dream wasn't viable. And they walked toward it anyway, completely blind, with nothing guaranteed except their hunger itself. There's actually a concept in psychology called a possible self, which is the idea that we carry mental images of who we could become. And research shows that the vividness of that possible self is one of the strongest predictors of whether someone actually pursues it. So we're not talking about talent here or resources. We're talking about the clarity of the image and the emotional charge behind it. It's something similar to what Addison Rae said about how when she wanted to start having a music career, she just went to a music label with a mood board of colors and images and vibes. And she was like, I don't know how to do this, but this is what I want. And she walked towards it and eventually achieved it because her album is literally, it literally sounds the way that she envisioned it, even if she didn't have any musical background back then. BTS had a vivid positive self. They could see it even in the hardest, darkest times of their career. They felt it so intensely, it became more real to them than the evidence against it. And to that point, I had a possible self too. Everyone has. I wanted to be an actress, a director, a screenwriter. I wanted to win an Oscar. I loved everything about film, and I still do. But somewhere along the way, I looked at that possible self and decided it wasn't plausible. So I never took acting classes. I stopped writing. I didn't train beyond what communication school required of me. And not because my dream had died, but because I slowly stopped feeding it. And the hunger eventually just went quiet. Camus wrote that one must imagine Sisyphus happy, referring to an idea that meaning isn't found in whether you reach the top, but in the act of pushing. Because what Sisyphus did is defy the gods that had punished him with rolling a boulder for eternity by just accepting it and choosing to do so. And in this case, we're talking about the choosing to go and how you have to decide the boulder is worth carrying before you know if you'll ever get anywhere with it. And that decision, that irrational, pre-irrational commitment is what I didn't make and what many of us didn't either. Why don't we let ourselves be consumed by what we actually want? I think part of it is that we've been taught to conflate passion with the responsibility. Like hunger is fine as a feeling, but you don't make life decisions based on feelings because you're a rational human being. You're practical and you manage your expectations. But Hume's point is that rationality was never the engine, it's the map. Passion is what makes you get in the car. And I've been so busy consulting the map that I forgot to drive anywhere. And I'm not saying this to romanticize suffering or to tell you to quit your job and chase something reckless, because I myself have a job that I love so much. And parenthesis, it's also important to note that there's a real socioeconomic dimension to this that I really don't want to flatten, which is that not everyone's hunger is for a dream. For a lot of people, especially in countries like Mexico, hunger is literal, and that changes the way that desire and survival interact. That's a whole other conversation. Sometimes your soul can't be hungry when your stomach is. So that's why these conversations always need to be intersectional in that sense. But for those of us who have the safety and privilege to dream and still choose not to, I think that's definitely worth examining. Why are we letting our souls starve on purpose? Because we believe we're not good enough? Because we're afraid the hunger will consume us and we'll have nothing to show for it? Because it's easier to want something quietly than to want it out loud and fail? I I I honestly don't have an answer as I'm still figuring it out for myself. But I think that the question is the beginning of something. BTS had no reason to believe. And maybe that's just the whole point. You don't need a reason. You need that thing in your eyes. Call it passion, call it eyeliner, call it whatever you want. I just want to look in the mirror someday and see it there. And being able to tell my dreams that they're safe with me because I'm gonna do something about them to reach them and make them my reality. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that some of this made sense to you. Thank you for watching.